Cyber Threat Brief for May 19, 2026. Microsoft Exchange Zero-Day CVE 2026-42897 is under active attack with no patch available. The Team PCP supply chain campaign hit peak intensity, with many Shai-Hulid worming through 170-plus NPM and PyPI packages, including TanStack's 12 million weekly download ecosystem, compromising Checkmark's Jenkins plugins and GitHub Actions workflows. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, contractor leaked AWS Gov cloud credentials and internal system passwords in a public GitHub repository. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Daily Security Brief, 2026-05-19. Next section, Critical Alerts. Microsoft Exchange Zero-Day under attack. CVE 2026-42897. Microsoft disclosed CVE 2026-42897, and actively exploited cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting, vulnerability affecting Exchange Server 2016, 2019, and Subscription Edition. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, added it to the KEV, Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog on May 16 with a May 29 remediation deadline. EPSS, the Exploit Prediction Scoring System, score is 0. 123, 94th percentile. Microsoft assigned CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, 8.1, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, assigned 6. 1. An attacker can send a crafted email that executes arbitrary JavaScript in Outlook web access, leading to mailbox compromise, session token theft, and unauthorized mailbox configuration changes. The risk is not server compromise but mailbox-level access that can enable BEC or ransomware initial access. 4 days after disclosure, no patch is available. Action: enable Exchange Emergency Mitigation service immediately if not already enabled. The EM service received an automatic mitigation for the CVE, or Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, and is enabled by default since 2021. Verify EM service status and enable manually if disabled. Monitor for suspicious OWA activity and mailbox forwarding rule changes. CVE 2026-42897 is a mailbox-level threat that survives password resets through persistent forwarding rules. Sources: Dark Reading the Hacker News. Cisco SDWAN Controller under exploitation. CVE 2026-20182, UAT 8616. The same threat actor behind CVE 2026-20127 exploitation earlier this year is now exploiting a critical authentication bypass in Cisco Catalyst SDWAN Controller. CIS added to the KEV catalog on May 17 with EPSS 0.259, 96th percentile. Post-compromise activity includes SSH key additions, netconf configuration modifications, and privilege escalation to root. SDWAN controllers are high-value targets for nation-state prepositioning because they sit in the middle of trust relationships and provide persistent access that blends into normal administrative activity, and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: patch Cisco SDWAN controller immediately. Review SSH authorized keys files, netconf configurations, and privileged user accounts for unauthorized changes. Assume compromise if CVE 2026-20182 or CVE 2026-20127 patches were not applied before exploitation windows. Source: The Hacker News. Ivanti extraction remote code execution, CVE 2026-8043, Ivanti extraction versions before 2026. 2. Contain a critical external file name control vulnerability, CVSS 9.6. Allowing remote authenticated attackers to read sensitive files and write arbitrary HTML to web directories, leading to information disclosure and client-side attacks. Action: update Ivanti extraction to version 2026, 2 or later. Review web directories and logs for unauthorized file writes or HTML injection. EPSS 0.1, 27th percentile, indicates low active exploitation risk but high severity warrants immediate patching. Sources: The Hacker News. Next section, Ransomware and Extortion. Team PCP supply chain campaign reaches peak intensity. The Team PCP campaign produced its loudest week since the March Trivy disclosure. Checkmarx officially confirmed its Jenkins ASD plugin was Trojanized, version 2026.5.09, with a 31-hour exposure window from May 9/1 to 25 UTC to May 10/8 to 47 UTC. This is Checkmarx's third compromise in 3 months. A malicious plugin was installed by several hundred Jenkins controllers. Remediate builds are 2.0.13848, V76E89 to 8A053, and 2.0.13847, V08C0072B2 FD5. Last known good build is 2.0.13829, VC72453 FA1C16 from December 2025. The mini Shai-Hulud worm published 639 malicious versions across 323 unique packages starting May 11 at 19 to 20 UTC. The worm poisoned 84 NPM artifacts across 42 at Tanstack packages in 6 minutes, including at Tanstack/ReactRouter with 12 million weekly downloads. It then propagated to Mistral AI, UiPath, OpenSearch, Guardrails AI, and roughly 170 packages across NPM and PyPI with combined cumulative downloads above 500 million. The worm harvests 20-plus credential types: Oz, GCP, Azure, GitHub, NPM, SSH, Kubernetes, Vault, Stripe, database connection strings, and attempts Docker container escape via host socket. Exfiltration goes to T. mkosh.com 443. A reported operator error limits the harvest from at UiPath and at Mistral AI variants because the payload is reassembled incorrectly there. This is the first documented NPM supply chain attack shipping with valid SLSA build level 3 provenance, demonstrating that supply chain security attestations can be weaponized. CVE 2026-45321, CVSS 9.6 was assigned. The worm includes a 1-in-6 disk wipe payload on Israeli and Iranian locale hosts. NHS England issued the campaign's first government alert. CIS has not issued guidance. The worm uses stolen NPM tokens to validate, enumerate packages, download tarballs, inject payload, add pre-install hooks, increase versions, and republish using the compromised maintainer's identity. 630 of 637 malicious versions also inject optional dependencies, entries, pointing to imposter, commits that deliver a second payload copy via the legitimate Antvis/G2 GitHub repository. The attack also compromised GitHub Actions, Workflows ActionsCool/Issues Helper, and ActionsCool/MaintainOneComment. comment. All tags in both repositories now point to imposter commits containing malicious code that exfiltrates credentials to T. mkosh.com, the same domain as at AntiV compromise. Only workflows pinned to known good full commit SHAs are unaffected. At AntiV compromise affected packages tied to NPM maintainer account ADL, including Etcharts for React, 1.1 million weekly downloads. At AntiV/G2, at AntiV/G6, at AntiV/X6, at AntiV/L7, at AntiV/S2, at AntiV/F2, at AntiV/G, at AntiV/G2 plot, at AntiV/Graphen, at AntiV/Darset, Timego, JS size sensor, and Canvas Nest, JS. The attacker published 558 versions across 279 unique at AntiV packages. The stealer harvests 20-plus credential types and exfiltrates to T. mkosh.com 443. The malware creates GitHub repositories with the description Niaga OGEWRH, DuluHIRS, reverses to Shai-Hulud. Here we go again. Over 2,500 such repositories exist in GitHub, providing a lower bound on the number of unique compromised CI/CD environments. Action, audit CI/CD pipelines for indicators of at Tanstack, at AntiV, ActionsCool/Issues Helper, ActionsCool/MaintainOneComment, comment, and Checkmarx Jenkins ASD plugin compromise. Search for GitHub repositories with description Niaga OGEWRH, DuluHIRS under your organization's accounts. Rotate all CI/CD secrets, GitHub, NPM, Oz, GCP, Azure, SSH, database credentials. Pin dependencies to known good full commit SHAs, not tags. Verify lock files. Do not trust SLSA provenance alone. Review Jenkins controllers for Checkmarx ASD plugin version 2026.5.09 installation. Lock T. mkosh.com at perimeter. Run malware scans on developer workstations and CI runners. Sources: The Hacker News, Sans ISC, The Hacker News, The Hacker News. Next section, Business and Infrastructure Threats. CIS, a contractor, leaked AWS Gov Cloud keys on GitHub. A CIS, a contractor, maintained a public GitHub repository named Private CISA that exposed credentials to multiple highly privileged AWS Gov Cloud accounts and internal CIS systems. The repository contained a file important AWS tokens with administrative credentials to 3 AWS Gov Cloud servers and AWS Workspace Firefox passwords. CSV with plaintext usernames and passwords for dozens of internal CIS systems including LZDSO, Landing Zone DevSecOps, the agency's secure code development environment. The repository also contained plaintext credentials to CISA's internal artifactory, a prime target for backdooring software packages that would deploy across CISA infrastructure with every new build. The commit logs show the CISA administrator disabled GitHub's default secret detection feature. Git Guardian detected the exposure and contacted the contractor, who did not respond. The repository was public until May 15. Security experts described this as one of the most egregious government data leaks in recent history. Action. Assume AWS Gov Cloud credential exposure if your organization shares infrastructure patterns with CISA. Review GitHub organization repositories for similar scratchpad or personal sync patterns. Enable GitHub secret scanning organization-wide and prohibit disabling it. Audit Artifactory and CI/CD systems for unauthorized package modifications. This incident demonstrates the risk of using public GitHub repositories as working scratchpads for privileged environments. Source: Krebs on Security. Threat actors disabling antivirus and EDR Huntress reports. Threat actors are moving beyond evasion to actively disabling endpoint security tools. Common methods include blocking EDR communications via Windows Firewall Rules or Windows Filtering Platform, WFP, to create hidden firewall rules that silence EDR agents while leaving them running locally. Attackers also escalate privileges to uninstall agents directly or use Bring Your Own Vulnerable Driver, BYOVD, techniques to load legitimate signed drivers with known vulnerabilities into the kernel, then exploit the driver to gain kernel mode access and terminate protected EDR processes. Huntress observes attackers abusing Microsoft Defender antivirus exclusions to exclude entire C and C/Windows drives and using rogue RMM, remote monitoring and management, tools to uninstall EDR from the command line. BYOVD is described as the new gold standard for EDR impairment. Action: monitor for Windows Firewall Rule creation targeting EDR agent processes. Audit Microsoft Defender antivirus exclusions for overly permissive paths, C/C/Windows. Restrict software installation permissions to prevent agent uninstallation. Block known vulnerable drivers used in BYOVD attacks. Deploy behavioral detection for kernel driver loads and EDR process termination attempts. Consider EDR solutions with kernel-level protection against BYOVD. Source: Huntress blog. Developer workstations are part of the software supply chain. Recent supply chain attacks. Team PCP, Shai-Hulud, target developer workstations to steal credentials, API, keys, cloud credentials, SSH keys, NPM tokens, and environment variables. Developer workstations concentrate context, local repositories, env files, shell history, SSH keys, package manager credentials, build scripts, debugging logs, and browser sessions. A single access token found next to a Git remote. Deployment script, README, cloud profile, and CI configuration tells an attacker where the token fits and what it might unlock. In the Shai-Hulud 2.0 campaign, GitHub credentials dominated the exposed and exfiltrated credentials, each with potential admin access to repositories and CI workflows. Developer machines concentrate software delivery authority, making local compromise a map for source control, cloud accounts, package publishing workflows, CI/CD systems, internal APIs, and production-adjacent infrastructure. Action: treat developer workstations as part of the software supply chain, not just ordinary endpoints. Implement credential segmentation. Development credentials should not have production access. Use hardware security keys for high-privilege accounts. Scan developer workstations for exposed secrets in env files, shell history, and local repositories. Deploy endpoint agents that monitor for credential harvesting behavior. Rotate credentials after any suspected workstation compromise. Source: The Hacker News. Next section, Windows/Active Directory security. Storm 2000-949 turned compromised identity into cloud-wide breach. Microsoft Threat Intelligence documented Storm 2000-949, a threat actor that launched a methodical attack to exfiltrate data from Microsoft 365 applications, file hosting services, and Azure-hosted production environments. The attack began with targeted social engineering leveraging Microsoft's self-service password reset SSBR process. The threat actor initiated SSBR on behalf of a targeted user and used social engineering, impersonating IT support, to persuade the user to approve MFA, multi-factor authentication, prompts. Once the user approved, the threat actor reset the password, removed existing authentication methods, phone numbers, email addresses, Microsoft Authenticator registrations, and enrolled Microsoft Authenticator on their own device for persistent access. Storm 2949 did not rely on traditional malware. They leveraged legitimate cloud and Azure management features to gain control plane and data plane access, execute code remotely on VMs, and access key vaults and storage accounts. The attack exfiltrated data from Microsoft 365 applications, file hosting services, and Azure-hosted production environments. Action: review MFA enrollment events for suspicious patterns, authentication method removals followed by new authenticator registrations. Implement conditional access policies requiring MFA registration from trusted locations. Train users to recognize social engineering targeting SSBR and MFA prompts. Monitor for unusual Azure Control Plane API activity, VM command execution, key vault access, storage account enumeration. Deploy behavior-based detections across endpoints, cloud environments, and identities to correlate identity compromise with cloud resource access. Source: Microsoft Security Blog. BitLocker's zero-day exploit, Yellow Key. Researcher Nightmare Eclipse published Yellow Key, a zero-day exploit that reliably bypasses default Windows 11 BitLocker deployments. The exploit targets the decryption key stored in the Trusted Platform Module, TPM. The exploit requires physical access to the computer. Action: BitLocker physical access attacks are not new, but this exploit bypasses default Windows 11 configurations. Organizations requiring BitLocker for compliance should evaluate additional pre-boot authentication, PIN, or startup key to mitigate physical access attacks. Monitor GitHub for Yellow Key proof of concept code and indicators. Implement physical security controls for devices with sensitive data. Source: Schneier on Security. Next section, General Security News. Mac OS Stealer S-Hub Reaper spoofs Apple, Google, and Microsoft Sentinel-1 documented a new S-Hub Stealer variant named Reaper targeting Mac OS. The malware uses fake WeChat and Miro installers as lures. The infection chain shifts its disguise at each stage. Payload hosted on typo-squatted Microsoft domain, mlcrosoft.co.com, executed under the guise of an Apple security update, and persists from a fake Google software update directory. Reaper leverages the Apple script //URL scheme to launch Mac OS script editor pre-populated with malicious payload, bypassing terminal entirely and sidestepping Apple's Tahoe 26. For mitigation for click-fix attacks, the malware checks victim locale settings for Russian input sources and exits if detected. CIS region exclusion. Reaper profiles visitors with JavaScript that collects IP address, location, WebGL fingerprinting, VM/VPN indicators, and installed browser extensions. Password managers like 1Password, Bitwarden, LastPass, and cryptocurrency wallets like MetaMask, Phantom. The malware exfiltrates credentials, steals documents with chunked uploads, and sends telemetry to operators via Telegram bot. The pages interfere with analysis by overriding console functions, intercepting F12 keystrokes, and running a continuous debugger loop. Action: block mlcrosoft.co.com at perimeter. Educate Mac OS users about fake installer campaigns and AppleScript //URL scheme abuse. Deploy EDR capable of detecting script editor automation and suspicious Apple script execution. Monitor for fake Apple X, protect remediator downloads, and unauthorized Google software update directories. Review Mac OS systems for persistence mechanisms masquerading as legitimate Apple or Google update processes. Source: Sentinel-1 blog. Microsoft Security Focus on Small Business. Microsoft published guidance for small business cybersecurity during National Small Business Month. Microsoft now processes 100+ trillion security signals daily and blocks 4.5 million new malware files daily. AI automated phishing is 4.5 times more effective than traditional attacks. Most modern attacks target identities, user accounts, and access. Microsoft recommends Microsoft 365 Business Premium as integrated productivity and security solution for small businesses with centralized visibility and automation. Microsoft emphasizes security as foundation of trust and business resilience. Source: Microsoft Security Blog. Next section, Patch Priority. Microsoft Exchange Server. Enable Exchange Emergency Mitigation Service immediately for CVE 2026-42897, CVSS 8.1, actively exploited, CIS a KEV due May 29. No patch available yet. Cisco SDWAN Controller. Patch CVE 2026-20182 immediately, critical authentication bypass actively exploited, CIS a KEV due May 17. Ivanti extraction. Update to version 2026. 2 or later for CVE 2026-8043, CVSS 9.6, RCE via file name control. Fortinet 40 Authenticator. Update to versions 6.5.7, 6.6.9, or 8.0.3 for CVE 2026-44277, CVSS 9.1, Unauthenticated RCE. Fortinet 40 Sandbox. Update to versions 4.4.9 or 5.0.2 for CVE 2026-26083, CVSS 9.1, Unauthenticated RCE. Next section, Vulnerability Disclosures. Fortinet Critical RCE Vulnerabilities. Fortinet released fixes for 2 critical flaws. CVE 2026-44277, CVSS 9.1, in 40 Authenticator allowing unauthenticated code execution via crafted requests, fixed in 6.5.7, 6.6.9, 8.0.3, and CVE 2026-26083, CVSS 9.1, in 40 Sandbox, 40 Sandbox Cloud, and 40 Sandbox PA-S allowing unauthenticated code execution via HTTP requests, fixed in 40 Sandbox 4.4.9 and 5.0.2, 40 Sandbox Cloud 5.0.6, 40 Sandbox PA-S 4.4.9 and 5.0.2. Source: The Hacker News. SAP Critical SQL Injection and Authentication Bypass. SAP shipped fixes for CVE 2026-34260. CVSS 9.6. An SQL injection vulnerability in SAP S/4HANA allowing low-privileged authenticated attackers to inject malicious SQL code and expose sensitive database information. Vulnerability only allows read access, so integrity is not compromised. SAP also fixed CVE 2026-34263, CVSS 9.6, a missing authentication check in SAP Commerce Cloud configuration caused by overly permissive security configuration with improper rule ordering. An unauthenticated attacker can perform malicious configuration upload and code injection, resulting in arbitrary server-side code execution. Source: The Hacker News. VMware Fusion Privilege Escalation, CVE 2026-41702. Broadcom Patch CVE 2026-41702, CVSS 7.8. A talk to, time of check, time of use. Vulnerability in VMware Fusion that occurs during an operation performed by a SEDUID binary. A malicious actor with local non-administrative user privileges can exploit this to escalate privileges to root on the system where Fusion is installed. Fixed in VMware Fusion version 26H1. Source: The Hacker News. N8N Critical Prototype Pollution and RCE N8N released fixes for 5 critical vulnerabilities. CVE 2026-42231 and both CVSS 9.4, allowing authenticated users with workflow permissions to achieve remote code execution via prototype pollution in the XML2.js library and XML node respectively. CVSS 9.4 is a bypass for that also results in RCE. Fixed in N8N versions 1.123.32, 2.17.4, and 2.18.1, and 3 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Source: The Hacker News. Azure Local Disconnected Operations Privilege Escalation, CVE 2026-42822. Microsoft disclosed CVE 2026-42822, an improper authentication vulnerability in Azure Local Disconnected Operations, ALDO, that allows an unauthorized attacker to elevate privileges over a network. Source: MSRC Security Update Guide. Next section, Trends and Context. Supply chain attacks have matured from isolated incidents to automated, self-propagating worm campaigns with valid security attestations. The Mini Shai-Huled campaign demonstrates that SLSA build level 3 provenance can be weaponized, undermining trust in supply chain security frameworks. The Team PCP campaign's rapid escalation, checkmarks Jenkins plugins, TanStack NPM packages, GitHub Actions workflows, and 170+ packages in 48 hours. Shows attackers are targeting the trust relationships in software delivery pipelines rather than individual vulnerabilities. Developer workstations have become high-value targets because they concentrate credentials and context that map to production infrastructure. Identity compromise is now the primary vector for cloud breaches, with legitimate administrative features replacing traditional malware for lateral movement and data exfiltration. That concludes today's Cyber Threat Brief. From Carolina Clear Tech. Stay patched, stay vigilant.